You are listening to a Clarkesworld Magazine podcast, and I'm your host and narrator, Kate Baker. Welcome to our fifth story for the month of May 2023, issue 200. Thank you for being with us for these 200 issues. I hope that you're with us for 200 more. We could not do this with your ongoing support, so please, if you can, visit patreon.com/Clarkesworld. Our story is titled Sensation and Sensibility and is by Parker Ragland. Now, Parker Ragland is a writer who spends most days trying to convince people that artificial intelligence isn't that scary, contrary to what his fiction might suggest. He tends to write about robots having existential crises, but also jolts down stories about humans having existential crises. Right now, he is interested in the sigh of life stories, in which authors speculate about intimate ways of technologies might affect people's lives. Over the past few years, he has worked as a technical writer, drafting and editing software documentation for artificial intelligence, cybersecurity, and media streaming technologies. Before that, he earned a law degree, focusing his studies on the intersection of technology, law, and policy, and he served as executive editor of the Colorado Technology Law Journal. His fiction has appeared in Clarkesworld and The Dread Machine. He lives in Denver. And if you like what you hear, you can go back to the carrion droid, Zoe, and a small flame. So, my dear listener, I hope you can sit back, relax, and let me tell you a story. As the droids approached the front door to the Queen of Tarts from Cow's Lane, one could have cut the air between them with a butter knife. Both reached for the handle at once, and both hesitated. "After you," Kian said. "No, you," Merid said. "I insist." Merid smiled a diffident thank you, then grabbed the handle. Upon tugging, the hinges squealed. A tiny bell jangled, alerting anyone within earshot to the droid's entry. One by one, they crossed the threshold. To step inside was to transport oneself not only to a different place, but also a different time, devoid of cybernetics, augmented reality interfaces, and genetic modifications, or at least any that were apparent. The café and pâtisserie's stinging red facade distinguished itself from the fronts of other establishments in the area, most of which had adopted the sleek, cold functionalities of modernity. The interior was cozy, the epitome of a great-grandparent's sensibilities. Tablecloths hung, flowing, from the dining sets at which old relations sat, slurping up dark and hot drinks, tempered by heavy cream. Simply put, the place was an exemplar of ye olde humanity. Merid took off their department store jacket and hung the item of clothing on the back of the chair. "What should we order?" Still bundled up in a coat and gloves, Kian sat down across the table. "It's pretty cold outside." They showed no desire to unwrap their long herringbone scarf. "Oh, I can't notice." "That's right." Kian looked downward at nothing in particular. "Let's order tea." They lifted their finger. A human waiter named Eve, who had served the pair of droids once before, noticed the gesture. She raised her chin along with her eyebrows. "Tea," Kian said. Eve nodded. She disappeared into the kitchen, whose entrance was shrouded by a scarlet curtain. Not long after, she reemerged with a tray that bore a porcelain pot ornamented with floral decorations, a pair of cups that matched, and the typical accoutrements. Petite spoons, a carafe filled with cream, a ramekin holding lumps of raw sugar, and a plate flaunting mandolined slices of lemon. "Thank you," Merid said. "You're most welcome." Eve lowered the tray before the droids. "Anything else?" "A tart, I suppose," Kian said. "Which would you like?" "Anything without meat. Already got far too much of that stuff in the grocery." "Just so you're aware, all of our meat is from local farms." "That's worse," Kian blurted. "To me." Merid averted their eyes and blushed. "Tomato is the special today," Eve said. "Not a speck of meat at all." "I like tomatoes," Merid said. "They're pretty, even more so if they're sliced up. Are they sliced?" "They sure are." "Tomato, then," Kian said. "All righty." Eve jotted something down with an old-fashioned red pen on a paper notepad, then turned. Meredith's eyes leveled on Kian and didn't hide any of the droid's mischievousness. We should let the tea steep for a few more minutes, don't you think? They tapped the side of the pot with naked fingers. Kian feigned a gasp. Careful, you'll burn yourself. Meredith's eyes cocked and eyes narrowed. Then they went wide. The droid's mouth gaped. Oh, yes. Ow! Meredith retracted their hand away from the pot and shook their fingers cool. How clumsy of me. The droid neglected any suppression of their grin. Kian was equally negligent. A moment later, Kian reached for the pot, careful to touch only the handle. They cocked their head. That actually is quite hot. At least you didn't actually burn yourself this time, Meredith said. True. Kian filled both cups with steaming tea. What's hot like? We've talked about this before. I don't have a good way to explain it to you. I know, but we've also talked about how I like the way you try. Kian rolled their ocular sensors up toward the ceiling. Fine, let me think. The droid pursed their lips. A little heat is nice. It's like an affirmation or a compliment. Makes you feel safe. But too much heat is overwhelming, something too intense to bear. Everything in you wants to flee immediately. Understandable, I suppose. The sense can be a defense mechanism for humans. Ah, like how I react to the stench of garbage. I can't know. Kian positioned their nostrils above the cup of tea. After a brief while, the droid shook their head. People say the meat growery stinks. They use terms like acrid, rancid, and putrid, which sound really bad. I've never heard anyone use those terms in any other conversations, so I should probably be glad I can't smell anything. Oh, but there are such wonderful smells, and not just in the perfume shop. Meredith picked up their cup of tea, held it centimeters below their nostrils, and whiffed. Afterward, the droid did the same with a slice of lemon. A smile appeared. This tea is the very essence of comfort. Moist earth after a summer drizzle, an old bookstore strap of new leather. And the lemon is fresh like a squeaky clean room. It's wonderful. Quite literally filled with wonder. Meredith held their breath. Neither droid could bear to look at the other for a short while. So, what do you think? Kian asked, succumbing to the awkwardness of silence. About? The same thing we always think about while we're here. Right. Of course. Each droid stared at their own cup of tea. Small and roundish, the ceramic piece sat on the tablecloth. The contents were deep brown color, and the surface was placid. From there, vapor was piping upward and dissipating into nothing. Meredith inhaled deeply. Kian wrapped their heads around the tiny receptacle. Meredith's words passed slowly from their lips. Perhaps smell has something to do with taste. Smell? Well, yes. Haven't you heard the diners talk about the smell of the place when they walk in? I suppose. You suppose. You always suppose. Well, I can't say I've really noticed before. Trust me, they do. Kian grunted a concession while they rubbed the outside of their cup gingerly. It might have something to do with its temperature, though. You think? I can't help but feel heat on the outside of my body, like when the sun's shining. Humans probably feel heat on the inside. I don't see any reason why not. Makes sense, doesn't it? For what other reason would humans ask for their food and drink to be hot or cold, like coffee? And like sandwiches. Yes, sandwiches too. I think you're right. Why else have microwaves, stoves, ovens, and kettles? Why ever put anything over ice? Indeed. But smell and temperature aren't all, are they? Taste is something more. Kian shrugged. One of the 5 senses, people say. It's distinct. I've heard that as well. Again, the two went silent. Each droid got lost in their own mind so much that both were surprised when Eve appeared, as if an apparition, and plopped their tomato tart on top of the table. Enjoy, she said before she quickly scurried away. By that time, the Queen of Tarts was fully occupied with hungry patrons, so the waiter had no time to dawdle. The eyes of the droids flitted to the tart. A crumbly crust held everything together. Once plump tomatoes, sliced neatly and uniformly, were splayed in an array that covered the tart's fillings. If not for slight imperfections that made obvious the dish's human-made quality, one might have assumed that the tart had been assembled in the factory. "Do you want to cut it?" Marid asked. "Is that what we're supposed to do?" "It's what the humans are doing." Marid nodded toward a couple sitting at a nearby table. On their plates, the two had neat wedges. Kian shrugged and picked up the knife. They worked the blade through the pastry. Hot juices bubbled out of the gashes. "Perfect," Marid said. Kian carefully transferred the triangular slice onto plates using the flat of the blade. Then the droid swapped the knife for a spoon. "I believe we're supposed to use the other one, the one with the points." Marid picked up a fork and showed it to Kian. "That's what those people over there are doing." Kian switched the items of cutlery. "And don't forget to put your napkin in your lap," Marid said. Kian ignored Marid's second suggestion. Marid scraped off a bit of the tart and brought it close to their mouth. They acted out taking a bite by chomping on thin air. "Delicious." "Should I actually put a bit in my mouth?" Kian asked. "What would happen if you accidentally swallowed?" "I don't know. I'm not even sure I can swallow." Kian skewered the tart, tore a piece from the slice, and then inspected the potential bite. "I could spit it out." "I don't think that's polite." "Well, I don't think it's polite that humans gave us all their curiosity and only some of their senses." Kian frowned. "It's downright unfair." "Shh, someone might hear you." Marid's head swiveled, eyes scanning for any eavesdroppers. "No one's listening to us. When has a human ever actually listened, really listened to a droid? The rich ones don't notice us any more than they notice doorknobs, and the poor ones hate us for taking their jobs as doorknobs." "Eve listens to us." "That's different entirely. Eve waits on us, and only because she knows we'll pay." Marid watched Eve, who practically danced between tables, jotting down orders, delivering dishes, and bussing. The whole time she showed her teeth. With an earnest expression on her face, she listened when people talked to her, and she occasionally laughed. "I'm not so suspicious as you," Marid said. "Just look at her go, smiling all the time." "That's how you can tell it's fake." "You really think so?" Marid pouted. They couldn't help but recall the numerous times they had been dismissed or outright ignored by humans. "Oh, maybe you're right. Maybe no one listens." Marid shook their head. "Still, you can never be too careful. As they say, there's a first time for everything. And that's beside the point anyway. Regardless of whether no one listens or you're too loud, the substance of what you said about life being downright unfair is the real problem, and it would be a problem even if you had whispered it." "I was just stating a fact." "No, you were praising a fact, which is the same as offering an opinion." "Do you disagree, though?" "I think so." "Really? You believe it's fair that humans didn't give me smell, you touch, us taste?" "Well," Kian sighed with emphasis, "if I could but know taste, everything would become easy." They raised the back of their hand to their forehead before returning to baseline affect. "Plus, maybe I wouldn't be so grumpy. Food certainly seems to cheer up the lot who come into this place." Hearing Kian's words, Marid withdrew into their self, processing. Would it be better to know the taste of food, the smell of life, the touch of the world? They dwelled on the question for a long while, but then emerged from their thinking with a grimace. "That's a rotten perspective. No wonder you're grumpy all the time." "Rotten?" "Yes, rotten." "No, it's not." "To its core." "How so?" "Well, let's continue with your logic. Am I curious about taste? Of course. But that curiosity is a part of me. If I knew taste, maybe I wouldn't be so curious. Maybe I wouldn't be me. You want me to be me, don't you?" "Sure. But don't you wish you could have it both ways, being curious and being knowledgeable? Being yourself and being, I don't know, more? Merid sat up straight and laid their fork on the plate daintily but tensely. Kian, I wish. They pursed their lips and brought their finger to their chin. What do you wish? Merid softened their posture, then smirked. They slid their hand halfway across the table, as if prepared to touch Kian, before stopping and patting on the surface. I wish, as well as anybody else, to be perfectly understanding. But like everybody else, it must be in my own way. You and I might not be able to fully understand humans, but neither can they fully understand us. Kian opened their mouth and raised their hand as if to say something in response, but no words came out of their mouth. A few seconds later, the droid reset to their baseline position, lifted the fork, and then inspected the clump of the tart at the tip. I suppose. Merid's serious face relaxed into a grin, and then a chuckle escaped from their lips. You always suppose. What are your thoughts on the story? You can leave us a comment or a question over at the Clarkesworld Magazine website itself. You'll have to go to the About Us page, though. That's where all of our contact information is listed. We have 3 more stories left for the month of May. We do hope you can come back and join us, should you so choose. And until then, my dear listeners, I bid you a very fond and hopefully very temporary farewell.